Okay, folks, so we have a violent week coming up, and number one, we need to talk about a specific sector that was going parabolic towards close last week. This is a sector that has a big catalyst starting tomorrow. What tickers should you know and which are most likely to run? Number two, I want to give the latest on Nile. Is it possible that a lot of folks are still in denial after that run on Friday? And lastly, number three, I want to discuss some other trades to be aware of, like HYMC, which had a pretty suggestive run towards after hours close on Friday. HYMC is quite a flirty McFlirty, ain't she? But will she take the gold? That's the question, and we'll be answering that. Okay, let's get right into it. So unless you live under a rock, you may have noticed the massive rallies in the devil's lettuce sector. Ticker after ticker has been going parabolic, and that's because in part due to a bill called the MORE Act. The MORE Act is described by writers as an act to decriminalize and deschedule the devil's lettuce, to provide for reinvestment in certain persons adversely impacted by the war on drugs, to provide for expungement of certain devil's lettuce offenses, and for other purposes. So what are the catalysts for this bill this week? Well, firstly, the House Rules Committee announced that it will hold a hearing regarding this bill on Monday, aka tomorrow, which is the final step before consideration on the actual House, where it will have an actual vote. And then secondly, if you go over to the docs.house.gov website, over to the bills to be considered on the House floor sector for the week of March 28th, which of course is this week, and then you scroll down to the very wee bottom, it says items that may be considered pursuant to a rule include the lovely MORE Act. Now, how does this process work? It's been a while since we've all seen the I'm Just a Bill song that they've been showing kids since the 1970s. But in order for a new bill to be voted on, you need to have a representative that sponsors said bill. The bill is then assigned to a House committee for study. If the committee approves it, it then goes on to the floor, where the floor can debate it, or amend it, or do nothing with it. So you have two huge catalysts this week. Number one, that committee hearing tomorrow, and then the eventual actual vote in the House, which should happen this week if the committee allows it to go through. And if the MORE Act passes the House floor, which it is likely to for reasons I'm about to explain, it goes on to the Senate committee, and then if they approve it, it goes on to the Senate floor. Now you need to know that an earlier version of this act was already passed in the House in 2020, but then when it made it to the Senate, it died before ever making it to the House floor. The sponsor of that bill in the Senate at that time was Senator Kamala Harris, who is now upgraded to the executive branch. Now that it's been reintroduced once more and is about to re-enter the House, members are hoping that they'll have more luck in the Senate. And part of that is because this time around you have a completely new Senate Majority Leader who said the last passage of this bill was a, quote, historic step towards finally ending the federal prohibition, which means folks are speculating a much higher chance of this at least making it to the Senate floor this time around, whereas again before it was dead on arrival. Now additionally, there's also interestingly a separate, more bipartisan MJ bill that the Senate on Thursday unanimously approved. This, while a lot less big of a step as compared to the MORE Act, is still a huge push in the right direction. As a senator who helped sponsor this bill said, quote, current rules and regulations make it hard for researchers to study how MJ and MJ-derived medications can be used to treat various conditions. This important legislation will cut the red tape around the research process, helping get FDA-approved MJ-derived medications safely to patients. Okay, so basically heading into this week, you have a setup where MJ is getting more and more attention. It's already shown a lot of proof of concept in terms of many main MJ ticker names, and pretty much throughout all of April and probably into May, you're going to see a lot of hype in the sector, both good and bad. So what's rallying so far on this news, and what should we be watching as we head into April? Well, so far your Ray of the Till, your CGC, your SNDL, your IGC, and one of the new names that we spoke about on ZipTrader Use Morning Briefing on Friday was CLVR. Now this was actually the first time I really saw potential in this play, and we briefed on it around $2 and it ran up to 4.2 at highs as Friday was a euphoric day for the sector, but let me explain why I actually liked it. It was more than just technicals. CLVR actually coincidentally just the day before reported earnings, and they beat earnings estimates by 65% on an earnings per share basis, that is, which is what aided them in going up so insanely on Friday. They've been incredibly effective at keeping costs down. You look at their cost per gram of devil's lettuce, they reported it at 22 cents, whereas Aora is at 234 cents, Sundial 186, and the Ray of the Till is at 72 cents. Ray of the Till is pretty competitive, but when you go and you look at CLVR, oof, you got competition. And you look at the markets they are targeting, you have Germany, US, Brazil, Australia, and Israel. A lot of people don't realize that countries like Germany have a much higher cost that you can sell it at. So if you can break into those markets with a very low marginal cost per unit, all of a sudden you have a lot of income potential. You compare Germany to the US and it's a huge difference, right? I think that over time that difference difference is probably going to be less and less, but in the next 10 years of development in this industry, you're going to see a huge discrepancy between some of the less legal countries and some of the more legal countries. The more legal something is, the less it's going to cost to really import it into that market, especially considering countries around the US, like again Canada, have legalized it, which makes it very, very easy to just import into the US. Versus Germany, there's not that many partners around them that they can get these things from. So when you're looking for a good MJ stock on both a speculative trade basis, but also on a long-term trade basis, you have to look at their ability to keep costs down. Now, I've said in the past that Tilray does have that ability to a very strong extent, but this one is on a different level, and I'm going to be looking a little bit more into this as an actual long-term trade, probably around the next report on earnings, but as of right now, still a spec trade. We'll keep you posted, of course, if we see new opportunities in MJ or other catalyst hype plays this week in ZipTrader Use daily morning briefings, and of course, we'll also talk about them in the nightly videos. Of course, the big distinction is in the morning is when most catalysts drop, so it's easier to identify what catalysts are relevant the morning of instead of nightly, right? But of course, this isn't something that you necessarily need to join us for. It's just something that we offer as an extra resource. Along with, of course, our lessons on strategy and how to actually attack trades, which is super important, our private chat, and our full list of price targets. But of course, going back to MJ, it's incredibly important to recognize that the biggest driver of capital into MJ stocks is legalization, specifically of that US market. And what's interesting about the bills that are about to be debated and likely voted on is that this is coming in a midterm election year. And this is important because research conducted just last year in 2021 shows that fewer than 10% of US adults say the devil's lettuce should not be legal at all. According to Pew Research Center, 31% say it should be legal for medical use only, and 60% for both medical and recreational use, which means a net 91% think it should be federally legal in some form, right? So if you're a representative taking a hardline no stance on this policy, you may start worrying more and more about your re-election chances. And I know that this has traditionally been a left versus right issue, but as time goes on, it's more of a demographic issue than anything else. I mean, majorities across all age groups except those who are 75 and older say MJ should be legal for both medical and recreational use. It's getting clear that US policy on this issue is getting less and less aligned with the actual voters in the country. Personally, if you want to hear my viewpoint, I feel like this is really an issue that the federal government should be leaving up to the states at this point. It seems reasonable on this issue, since there's so much difference of opinion state by state, that you should leave it up to the states and let them adopt the trends if they see fit and when they see fit. I do think that overall the trend is most states will want to legalize it, given how lucrative the industry is, how many jobs it would create, how much tax revenue you can get, and also overall the demographic shift in opinions on this. By making it illegal, you create a huge discrepancy between state and federal policy, and you destroy the efficiency of an industry that could be much more efficient. Of course, government and efficient are two different things, but still. In terms of my predictions on a practical level based on trading, so far we've had a pre-anticipatory run on that House committee hearing, which is tomorrow. I would expect a rally after that if they allow it to pass onto the floor. Once it's on the floor, you're likely going to get a pre-anticipatory rally given market conditions that are healthy. And then post that, if it gets approved, maybe a little bit of a post-catalyst rally and then a lot of profit taking. Once it gets to the Senate committee, I think that people are going to assess that there's a risk of it getting stalled again in the Senate committee and not actually reaching the floor. And thus you're going to see a decent amount of profit taking. But if it does actually get accepted onto the floor, which odds are stronger now than they were last time, then you'll get another round of hype. I think it's probably best to treat this as a momentum trade where you're not holding through catalyst, but you're playing off the momentum itself. At the end of the day, most MJ stocks are going to be trading like pump and dumps until you get some solid legalization in major markets. Okay, next, Nile. So on Thursday's video, we made the case for a hype trade set up on Nile based on upcoming catalysts that we broke down in that video, and we talked about how it was likely going to continue to gain steam and attention. So far for the latest, it's moved from number 6 on top discussed stocks on Reddit to number 2, right behind GameStop and ahead of the S&P 500. And that's of course been aided by another 35% or so run at highs on Friday. Now it's important to be clear of why it's running. It's running because it's getting a lot more attention right now, and people are anticipating it getting more and more attention. And obviously a fun hype trade for people trading the moves on Friday. But keep in mind that the next catalyst and the real catalyst for the stock that have real substance are around the anticipation of spin-offs of their various subsidiaries. If you haven't watched my full video breakdown on Nile and you're into spec hype plays and how to trade them and what catalysts are making them run, I recommend watching the video we did on Thursday. It's about 2 videos ago. You can go back to the channel homepage and find that. It's a fairly complex play, and you should watch that video. But in any case, when you see how much volume this is getting and compounding attention, and when you consider that this is just a $69 million stock, it does increase the odds that when you get real catalysts, the crowds will be locked and loaded. And it's now the number 3rd most watched ticker on StockTwits. Now, to me, given all this attention, it seems significantly more likely to attempt a new breakout this week, especially considering that Bitcoin, which is one of the drivers for the stock, has been on an uptrend as markets have been closed. Now, if we get that risk on spec fever that we had the last week, I could easily see you getting a day, probably early to mid this week, where you blow through not just the previous high, but also the 2 other resistance levels, adding a lot more FOMO buyers to the mix. Usually when you get a ton of attention over a weekend, when a stock is already run, it creates this dynamic where a lot of people do try to push it up mid the next week. And if it pushes up enough, you get a lot of the FOMO buyers that decided not to buy in early start saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to buy it now, and then that causes it to rally up even more. The more technical levels we can reach on this, the more you're going to have spec traders try to pour into this. If, or rather when we get a turn back to risk off, which will probably be at least 1 or 2 days this week, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to where it retains value. I would love to see it cool down to support in the 0.60s and hold some retaining value, which would set it up for a more risk-adjusted trade when it turns around and you get closer to the other catalysts. If it can't retain much value, that would be incredibly disappointing considering how much more people are aware of this. But at the same time, it wouldn't disqualify it either. Okay, next, I want to talk about HYMC. You'll want to be aware that HYMC kind of struck gold in the after hours on Friday. AMC CEO Adam Aron, who of course helped catalyze the overall interest in HYMC, tweeted that he's in LA for Oscars this week and he's thinking about issuing a NFT for AMC Investor Connection members, which is inspired by Hycroft Mining and the success they've had providing the recent influx of liquidity for the once cash-strapped mining company. Whether or not you like AA Adam Aron, you should really be paying attention to the 3 A's. Attention, attention, attention. If he can bring even more attention to the small, low-float stock who has gotten a huge influx of liquidity, which actually could make it a much better company over the long run, that's really all you need to get more momentum trades on this. HYMC is connected to both an individual as well as a stock that gets constant retail attention. And as long as that's the case, HYMC will have a flow of new retail hype rallies to trade off of. Do I think that HYMC makes sense as a long-term hold? Quite frankly, it's just not a focus of mine. Lastly, in terms of notable earnings this week, earnings have winded down quite a lot, but you do have some. XPeng on Monday, hopefully they report and are received better than our poor little Neo, which by the way, wasn't that bad. It's just that the supply chain has been hurting them. You also have Prog, which is a big retail hype stock. I bet we're going to be hearing about this week. Tuesday, you have Micron, Sundial, Lulu, Chewy. Wednesday, you have UiPath, and then on Thursday, you have BlackBerry, which of course is another traditional meme stock, as well as Archimoto stock. Anyways, folks, looking forward to spending another week with you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us below or join us on ZipTrader Circle if you're looking to learn how to trade with our step-by-step lessons, our private chat, our daily morning briefings, as well as our full price target list. Make sure to join us with the link below. Coupon code NEVERGIVEUP. Don't join us if you're not going to commit yourself to putting in the work, showing up every single day, watching each and every single one of our lessons, and also having a clear action plan and intention before you actually join the course. What am I looking to achieve from this? What am I going to put into this course in order to actually make that a reality? Am I going to paper trade? Am I going to practice? Am I going to force my way into getting my money's worth out of this ZipTrader U course? And am I willing to stick around longer than the rest? We have some folks that joined our program 2 years ago because we do give lifetime access for a one-time fee, and they participate in the chat room, and we absolutely love that. Have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.